What's up, beloveds? It's Coach Roberta, your friendly disruptor. Today's topic: can we stop doing this?
I think we could all agree that that's not optimal.
Yes.
I think we could all agree that being a single mother, though that could be a season, circumstances, widows, which the church encourages us to care for. We would all agree that that is not the ideal. Now, here's some empirical truth for you. And I'm sorry that I'm saying this to you. When they did a study, a secular study, not a Christian study, not a red pill study, a secular study, they found, went over this multiple times. Anyone could Google it. 56% working women stay home. This is a empirical study that is not a Christian study. It has nothing to do with focus on the family. It has none of this stuff. Okay. So based on the thousands of couples surveyed, the vast majority of women with kids 18 and under would have preferred to stay home. They would have preferred to stay home.
Can we stop doing this, folks? First, let me say off top, I rock with Ruslan. I recently started following him, but I'm kind of one of those people when I consume content or I find a source that I really like, I'll consume, a lot of their content just to really get a level set on what that person is about and not just sound bites. So I've been watching a lot of his content, and most recently something came up on my feed. It wasn't a recent post, but it was a post from 7 months ago. In that post, he quoted a statistic about a survey that was conducted.
Now, here's some empirical truth for you. And I'm sorry that I'm saying this to you. When they did a study, a secular study, not a Christian study, not a red pill study, a secular study, they found out that 56% of all working women with children 18 and under, 56% of all working women with children 18 and under would have preferred to stay home. Okay? Wow. I've referenced this study multiple times. We went over this multiple times. Anyone could Google it. 56% working women stay home. This is a empirical study that is not a Christian study. It has nothing to do with focus on the family. It has none of this stuff. Okay. So based on the thousands of couples surveyed, the vast majority of women with kids 18 and under would have preferred to stay home. They would have preferred to stay home. Okay. Which means that most women with children would have preferred to stay home. Women that work.
The data is outdated.
Using stats and data out of context, not checking the context, research on where the data came from, if the data is accurate or if the data is outdated. I saw a young lady do it on Hardly Initiated, and she was way off, and I did a video about that. But here's really the caveat. I know sometimes we can get hyped and hypervigilant when we find data that supports our point of view. I just think it's important for us to validate the data. The data that he referenced is from 2015. Now, I am aware that some people recently did a blog, or we can say more recently, someone used the data and, created an article and some other things. And so I get it. But the thing is, when people, if they have integrity, when they mention the data, they will also include a link of where they got the data from. If you follow the breadcrumbs, that particular survey was done by Gallup, and it was done in 2015. Folks, this 2023, so data from 2015, while it's not invalid for that period of time, I think we need some more current data if we're trying to substantiate a point, or at least say, here's a survey that they conducted 8 years ago, right, to give context, so it doesn't seem like you're using data that was real time. And sometimes you've gotten all the way through your stuff and you're looking at it and you said something that was out of context. That's what captions are for. Do some kind of correction. And I'm new to the in terms of like making YouTube videos. Maybe can we at least just add an edit if we say something? I just think that's an integrous thing to do if we know we misstated or misquoted something to the extent possible. Now sometimes we just overlook it, and it's not that we're being in ill intention when we do it. Again, this is really not about Ruslan, but he was just the most recent person that I saw do it. I do definitely think he does what he does, and he does it with integrity and etc. So he's just the person that I'm using as a lesson learned for this time. What really brought this to my attention was Kevin Samuels. Well, I saw Kevin Samuels do it, but I've been in corporate America for over 30 years, and I've seen in different spaces, not just in corporate America, but in spaces with executives and VPs, when they are trying to create their business case, they will use data, but when you start saying, well, where that data come from and how many people were actually surveyed, right? Because for that particular survey, and I'm going back to the survey of, moms coming out of the workforce, in 2015, I believe there were over 3 million people in the United States. The data, and if you follow again the breadcrumb data from the Gallup poll, as I mentioned, 2015, I believe the survey actually came out. The data was obtained between 2014 and 2015. So it appears that they took 2 years to collect the data, and they used data from 1,059 men and 984 women. So again, there's 3 million people in 3 million people in the United States in 2015. Now, the data was conducted on individuals 18 years and older, so obviously there's some nuances. If you ask the new young teenage mom what they think, they're probably thinking they may have the same thought, but maybe not for the same reason as someone who is more mature and seasoned and in their motherhood, in terms of, do I want to be a stay-at-home mom and focus on the children and the family, or do I want to be outside? I'll just say, if you Google it, you can see Time Magazine 2015. They did something, and the title was, I am one of the 56% of American mothers who prefer to stay at home. That was 2015. I believe also there's several. To Ruslan's point, you can just look up that phrase, 56% of U.S. women prefer working, and a couple of things will come up. And the only reason that I'm using this data is because that's the data that Ruslan, this is the survey data that he referenced, even though he didn't say what year. But if you look at the year that you see most of the articles saying that 56% of women prefer to stay at home, it came again from a 2015 Gallup poll. I'm not a statistician, but I have taken some statistic classes, and data gets skewed when we use data, because it makes it sound like a SME, right? A subject matter expert. When we use a set of data, but if you don't have a large enough sample size for the population of people that you are trying to build your hypothesis or your point around, then in terms of accuracy, the data is not accurate. Recently, I was in a setting with, I'll just say, some executives. I kind of move in a couple of different spaces. So whether church, work, community, etc. And they were using some feedback from a survey to substantiate what the sensing was from an overall, population. When I just asked a clarification question to say how many people were actually surveyed, and of the people that you sent surveys to, how many responses you got, the math wasn't mathing. And I think that is non-integrous when people do that. And I get it, because I get a lot of surveys. If you call me on the phone and ask me to do a survey, I'm not going to respond. So I get it, right? You got to talk to a lot of people. You got to email a lot of people, whether you're sending out Survey Monkey for a course you did, a master class, church, work, etc. I get it. So a lot of people aren't going to respond to the survey. What I believe is inappropriate is saying we sent out surveys to 1,500 people. If you only got 10 back, you cannot use that data to say, the general consensus is X, Y, and Z. You don't have a large enough sample size. So again, I get, in a social media environment, we get what we get. And sometimes the data is helpful. I, again, just think it's important as believers to have context when possible, and let people make their own decisions, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, here's data from 2015. Have things evolved since then? Maybe not. But here's where people landed in 2015, and let people make an informed decision versus us trying to create bias and confirmation bias, where we do research to substantiate our point, but not give a full picture. So, for example, if you have a population size of 100,000 plus people, in order for it to be a margin of error of 3% or less, you need to survey at least 1,100 people. That's for a population size of 100,000 people. We're talking about 3 million people. Now, when they asked the question, women, August 5th through the 9th, in 2015, 53% said they prefer to work outside the home. 44% said stay home. In 2014, August 7th and 10th, so apparently they do the survey the same time each year. In 2014, 50% said work outside the home, 46% said in home. I'll do one more. In 2012, 51% said outside the home, 44% said inside the home. Okay. And I'm not going to be petty, but just here's some data that the 2015 Gallup survey even tells you in terms of how they collected the data. It says, in addition to sampling error, question wording, and practical difficulties in conducting surveys can introduce error or bias into the findings of public opinion polls. Now, let me just say, in terms of surveys, you also have a percentage of people who either don't answer the question or neutral. That is a big indicator. When people are neutral, it's like, I don't really have a dog in it. They can move one way or the other. So, it's not like a gotcha moment. Let me say this. I understand his point. I understand the contention where he talks about fourth generation feminism. I'm not on that bandwagon one way or the other. In terms of that piece, I am pro woman, but I believe I'm solidly biblically based pro women from the standpoint of what God intended when He created women, and I can support that. I'll do that in another video. I'm just saying that, especially for those of us who are rebutting, especially red pill stuff, because they kind of come down real staunch, and again, they sound good, and sometimes they use data and facts to make them, sound like they're more professional and seasoned in some areas. I'm just saying, check the breadcrumbs, check where they're getting their data from. We saw this a lot in politics. That's why they do a lot more fact finding, and I don't think we should be any less careful, again, when we are using data to substantiate a point. And even if you have to say this data is from 2015, it may not negate the point you're trying to make. I'm just saying, give context for where you got your data from.
But I'm just saying, if we're going to use a statistic, let's not be like some of the red pill community that likes to show up like they're subject matter expert, and they use statistics, etc., and the information isn't accurate. It's not accurate. Yeah. So again, I rock with Ruslan. I think he does great work. I don't agree with every single thing he says and does, but who does, right? I follow what I believe are some really, really solid podcasters, believers, ministers. Do I agree with every single thing? No. So we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I get eat the meat and spit out the bones.
You can find a more current poll by Gallup, which did the 2015 survey, and in 2019, October 24th, on Gallup.com, you can find another article that the information is updated. Here's just a summary of that survey. 56% of women prefer to work rather than be a homemaker. 50% of women with children under 18 prefer to stay at home. 45% to work. October 2019, COVID hadn't really happened, or at least shut down a lot of states and communities. But I would venture to say, and I'm always curious, what if God used this opportunity, again, not created COVID, because I want to make a distinction between when God uses a thing and when He creates a thing, again, to help create a healthy balance. This was the first time that corporations in large numbers, yes, there was telecommuting, and some people were able to work virtually prior to that, but this was the first time that executives kind of all over the world decided, do we just want to keep our businesses shut down, or do we want to find a way and be more open and amicable to say, hey, is this something that you can do at home? Right? So now that creates opportunities for women to stay. And yeah, there have been probably, and I'm not purporting to be a subject matter expert in this particular area, work from home jobs and what they were, probably some telemarketing and virtual assistants and other things. But this is the first time that women have been able to do some of their same other jobs as executives, maybe do some engineering stuff, administrative stuff, human resource, to work at home and still be at home with their kids, where in terms of finding a more natural work-life balance or look for some more opportunities to do that, to do this and that, as opposed to them having to choose. This has probably been the closest that the world for generations have been to women not always feeling like they have to do it either or, right? So that gives them more of an opportunity to see what having dominion over the earth and subduing it means. It means that I can work from home. I can tell you, I've been working virtually for over 3 years. In fact, even before COVID, I was telecommuting. In terms of your energy level, you're not, if you have a job, depending on where you live, what state you live, your job can literally be 20 minutes from your house, but you're spending an hour on the freeway just to get 5 or 10 miles, depending on the area that you may live in, right? So you might be getting 2 hours back just in terms of travel time, right? So that's not only travel time, but the energy that it takes, that you exert to be in traffic, in a gridlock, to be a defensive driver. That's 2 hours you get back for your family. Is it a lot juggling if you have little people at home while you're trying to do conference calls, etc.? Yeah, but there's also, opportunities to manage that. In fact, I was just recently on a webinar, and someone presented a pretty cool option. The things that they put on, like your hotel, to say don't, I'm sleeping, don't come in, or whatever. Something similar like that, but they had colors: red, green, and yellow. Red meant when you see this on the door, that means I can't be interrupted, right? Whatever I'm doing. If the kid sees yellow, it means I can be interrupted, but I can't, it can be short and brief. And if it's green, it means, yeah, I'm available, right? So again, those are different ways to be creative and to be able to work from home, especially if moms are being able to do that they can work at home and still be a stay-at-home mom and and take care of their household. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not working with integrity if they throw a load of clothes in, right, during their break or their lunch break, and then came back to their desk, right? It's levels to this. So there's certain things that you can get a lot done in a 10 minute break, a 30-minute lunch break, right? That makes it easier. So in terms of when we're having these conversations, and again, I don't really get into the third and fourth generation. I think that's what they're calling it, feminism. I did a whole YouTube video on, so I know how feminism has involved and what the movement initially started out in terms of women's suffrage, etc. Again, if you're a believer, I think we need to trust the sovereignty of God and really just stop and pause and not be knee-jerky to think that anything that means a shift in gender roles does not mean that God does not have his hand on it. We use scriptures like God is doing a new thing. Well, what might that look like? We kind of compartmentalize what we think that means. What if a new thing that he's doing is, again, being able to remind his children that you can do this and that. I made you so much more than one dimensional. Throughout your whole life, you're going to have various roles. And I get it. Some children, especially if you have high needs children, special needs, they have a disability, ADD, ADHD, where they require more concentration, and the families can afford for the mom to be at home, etc. But there's also times where, and even with our parents or generations before us in certain communities, because it didn't look the same for everyone, is that when families or women became empty nesters, they totally didn't know what their purpose was. They felt like their only purpose was to have children, to be fruitful and multiply. And yes, that does include who you raise, right? Your purpose. You may raise the next doctor, physician, person who's curing cancer, president, congressman, statesman, or whatever. But it also means after that season is up, like at what point trying to get back into, whether it's the workforce or just even if you want to volunteer in the community, if you haven't developed some skill sets, what does that look like, right? And so the Bible says whatever we can find our hands to do it as unto the Lord. So I just think, we just need to have some different conversations in different spaces. I certainly understand that it is important to have a family and life balance. I've been a working mom. I have daughters who have at some point in their careers or raising their children have been stay-at-home moms and have also gone back into corporate working environments or whatever. I think the real issue that we really need to really search our hearts about and do a little bit more intel is, what does God's word tell us about the role of a woman, and not whether she should stay at home or be working. What we do know is from Genesis 1, so that's day one, ground zero, what he said was male and female. He created them to have dominion over the earth and subdue it, to be fruitful and multiply. That does not just mean women multiply at home or they have dominion over the home environment. There are other environments where women will dominate that sphere of influence, and that doesn't mean that she can't come home and defer to her husband. So she can be a boss in the boardroom and know her role at home and in the bedroom. So I hear all of this femininity and all that, and listen, I get it. Probably the closest word you can find to femininity in the Bible, the closest word you can find to femininity, just in my short observation of that particular term, right? Because it's kind of been a buzzword the last couple of years and gained some momentum, is charm. Okay. And yes, are women charming? Yes. Do we leverage that? Yes, but it also says charm is deceitful, and beauty can fade away. So we could that's for another topic. But and you can't find masculinity in there either. I'm gonna just stop right there. But Ruslan, he said something in one of his videos, and I can't quote which one it was, but he made a point, and I was like, that so resonated with me. He said, because you have a lot of people in the red pill community using scriptures and quoting them out of context or whatever, and he said, when guys in this space start speaking as authorities in spiritual matters, it's now my business. That really resonated with me because I feel the same way. Guys, girls, females, bosses, whatever they calling themselves, when they start speaking in a space as authorities on spiritual matters, how Tab say that's my business. This is part of the areas that it is either greater shift in terms of what Coach Rowe's business is to help in this area to kind of do some level setting, really some reframing, and kind of challenging some of the notions that we've had in Christendom, that if they didn't create some of what we see even in the secular world, perpetuated some of that, or created an environment for these things, breeding environments for some of what we see in these red pill communities, and this misogyny and a whole lot of other stuff. So anyway, I'm gonna be off my soapbox on this particular part of the subject, y'all. There's a shift and a pivot happening in terms of roles in my life too, and so more to come. I'm, again, I don't plan to be, and I don't think my calling is to be that person who does reaction videos always. Part of my role is a thought provocateur, right? I am a friendly disruptor. I come in peace. I really do, because it's not about me being right for the sake of being right, but it is, doing what's right, doing the right thing with integrity from a godly perspective. And, if we're talking about, well, what does the word say? It's like, let's look at some options. Are there things that, that's in the word that maybe we haven't acknowledged up until this point, or that have not been rightly divided, have been taught from a patriarchal and misogynistic filter. If our filter is wrong, we're gonna again be looking for confirmation bias in some things. And
I just think there's something a little different when we use data, because it gives this more authoritative way of being to make it seem like, I know so suchy much. And we don't have to do that, because again, we have other things that what we say can stand on, right? So that's it, y'all. That's all I'm saying.
Context. I said it in a previous video. I think that as believers, especially when we are trying to debunk something, truth is truth, right? And I get facts and truth aren't always the same, but I feel like, to the extent possible, if we're going to be using data from another source, we need to try to validate that data, make sure it's accurate, and if not, just say that and kind of just couch it that way. And I think it gives more credibility to what is being said. So I'll sign off for now. This is Coach Roberta, your friendly disruptor. Until next time, be well and take care, beloveds.